Hi there, I'm Judy Slate. I'm with the Bozeman Schools Foundation, and joining me is Jenny McGay, and she is the chairperson of our Spark Grant Committee. So since you can't make it to this grant writing workshop, we're going to sort of answer some of your questions and try to help you, guide you through this process that is relatively easy, but there are certain things that we're looking for. So the first few questions on the application are pretty simple.
Yes,
Just,
we call them like gatekeepers.
Exactly.
So like be sure that you fit within there. That'll take care of you there.
Right.
Yeah, but you don't get points for them.
So those are relatively self-explanatory, but
Yep.
we're going to move on to the first question that people might want a little assistance with, which is the summary description.
Yeah, and I think a great way to think about the summary description is like, you receive your grant, we're going to take that statement and essentially put it into the newspaper. So if you write it as if people reading the newspaper would read what your project was about.
Okay, so just like a one or two
Yeah,
line.
it's 4 to 6. We take 4 to 6 sentences, but we want to make sure, like, if you're writing, I always say if you're going to explain to your non-educator family member
Okay.
what you're doing with this money, that they would be able to understand kind of what you're doing, you know, in a nutshell kind of a thing within that amount of time.
All right.
That amount of space.
Next, purpose statement.
So that's-
Identify the clear purpose of your grant project.
Yeah, absolutely. That's again. So the people reading grants, there are a few educators or people who pass the educators, but for the most part, your people reading these grants are non-educators. So using a lot of acronyms is not a great idea. The education ease, be sure you're clear on it. But the purpose statement, really what we want to know is how this is affecting students, right? So a downfall would be writing how it makes your life as a teacher better. Obviously, we want to make your life as a teacher better, but the way that our committee members read is how it's affecting students, right? And so what is it doing to support students in enrichment, enhancement, somewhere in that area, kind of meeting the mission of the Bozeman Schools Foundation, right, is to enrich and enhance education. So we support that. That's kind of what that purpose statement is going to be around. As clear as possible in that one. I'm looking here, and we give you quite a few characters, 3,000 characters. Don't feel like you have to use them all, but feel like you want to really explain to people like your passion about why you're doing this.
Great. Okay, relevance to school curriculum.
Yeah, so a lot of people like to write down standards, which is fine, but again, remember you're not writing to have teachers read it, you're writing for community members to read it. So feel free to, you can mention a standard, but also then explain the standard, what you're really hitting there. But I think as a teacher, I would use standards to kind of guide there, and then from there explain it a little bit more, you know, to people reading it.
I think that's really important, is to remind when you're thinking about writing this that community members are reading this.
Absolutely,
not
I'll probably
teachers.
say that 3 more times
Yeah.
before we're done.
All right, clear and attainable project goals.
Right, this was brought in by Rob a handful of years ago, and it's really helpful to help us see that you really know what you're wanting from this money from beginning to end, right? So we know your project goals. You want to be really specific in project goals, right? Like obviously you want students to enjoy science more, but if you say one of my goals is for students to enjoy science more, that doesn't really give a weight. You're not going to get a higher score, essentially is the best way I should say it. You want it to be able to, us to see kind of like, wow, if you didn't have this money and didn't do this program, then those students would be missing out, right? And so those goals should reflect that. Like, we are going to do this for students, kind of a thing.
I saw one where someone said, well, it was like a literacy, something to help with kids read. They said, we want kids to read better. But that is just sort of flat. Correct,
because so many things could fill that goal. We want, you know, obviously you want this money for this project. So what, you know, a community member might read it and say, why? Like, why do you need that? Why can't you just use this? So you want to kind of, you know, explain it why you need what you're wanting, kind of a thing, yeah.
Okay, the timeline, that's somewhat.
Yeah, except for it's, you know, this one will get people, and this is when people come to the meeting, I make sure that they understand that the more clear you are in your timeline, like November 1st, receive money, November 3rd, students will, you know, and give as much as you can there, the more we can see as readers that you really know what you're doing here. Like, this is not like, I'm still thinking about the project. If I get the money, then I'll do more work to figure the project out. Instead, we want to be able to see that that project is planned and that you are desperate for that money, right? Because we are the givers of the money, but there's a lot of people who are giving their hard-earned money, right, to these programs or grants that we're writing for this money. So we don't want to give it frivolously. And so, this kind of helps us to see, wow, this person knows what they want to do and they have a plan. They're ready to go. All they need is the money.
Okay. Creativity and innovation.
Yeah, this is like the fun part, like why. And so I always say some things are on them in and of themselves creative and innovative, and then the project could be creative and innovative. An example is handfuls of years ago, Jim Thompson, a high school teacher at Bozeman High, he wanted curtains for the 60s museum, right? And so curtains are not really creative nor innovative. They've been around for a while and there's not a lot of innovation there. But the project itself was, and the reason why they needed it to make the project more innovative and more creative, it gave students the idea of a museum setting. So that was funded, right? So obviously, like, we funded a drone last year. Like, that's a no duh. You could write for hours on how innovative and creative that is. But he also wrote on the responsibility of using a drone. So he added that in there, and that really helped the readers to see that. So, this is the place where you make us know that, this is something that they want to have. Oftentimes, community members are looking these things up in this section, right? We're going, what is this? And if you want to give us a link, there are links that you can add to it. So if there's a video and you're like, this video will show it better than I can explain it, you can add that in there too.
Okay, and this one I think is really important for the Spark grant is sustainability. Right,
sustainability. So this is a Spark grant, and I want you to keep your mind around that you're sparking something new, different, better. Obviously the curtains that I mentioned earlier weren't new and necessarily weren't different because they had been doing that project before, but it was that much better, right? So new, different, better is kind of what we're talking about, and we want it to be able to be used over and over again. Now, yes, we do fund certain types of field trip situations, right? And it's, again, they really have to be explained well in order to have that happen because that money is essentially spent and gone. But then your job as the grant receiver would be to create language, create something to share with a whole bunch of other teachers so that field trip could be is sparked. The idea of going to that place is sparked. Sustainability of things, items, right? We don't one of the things we don't fund is food. It's not sustainable, right? So we don't fund food for a meeting for the kids we don't fund pizza parties, those kinds of things. It's really, think about it this way. The person who's giving you money, someone's writing you a check for $3,000, how can you tell them, look, not only is it worth your money this year, but it's worth your money in these years to come.
Good. All right, moving along, evaluation.
Yeah, so this is, as a teacher, you're thinking of, evaluation can mean different things. And don't get hung up on one or the other. It doesn't say assessment, and that's a different word than evaluation. So how are you going to evaluate that the program worked? We will ask, everyone who gets funded is going to present how they used the money and the project essentially at a board meeting, right. A Bozeman Schools Foundation board meeting. So this just kind of helps you to pre-plan how you're going to tell us what you did, how well it worked, that kind of a thing. And, don't be afraid if part of it doesn't work, if you have a great idea and it tweaks and it moves into something different. That's okay. We just want it to be sparking creative and innovative teaching, really.
All right, the budget's pretty self-explanatory, although you do want it to be somewhat specific.
So let me give you here's a little key here is another kind of helpful tip is if it says, what are we funding? This is when I read, this is one of the first places I look. If you say technology equipment, $3,000, I'm less likely to give that a higher score because, again, you're asking me to give you $3,000 for something that I'm not really sure as a reader, and my responsibility as a reader is to ensure I'm giving it to the right people. So I always joke, but the people who have it down to the cent as to how much it's going to cost get higher scores from a lot of us on the reading team.
And breaking down each
Exactly,
item.
exactly. And that's where we end up catching like, ooh, we could help you. No, we can't fund that, but we could help you with that in another way. A lot of creative and really cool people sit and read from the community, and very giving people. And there have been times when someone sees, oh, they need $500 for that, and we don't fund that, but I can help them get money that way. That's happened before. So be specific. Be as specific as you can. One thing there with technology, if you're writing for technology, make sure you contact the office here, because we need to send you to the technology people, and that needs to go through, that needs to be vetted through the technology department here
So
for
the price.
the
you mean.
prices
Okay.
due. Yeah, right. So we need to make sure that kind of, I don't want you to do more work
Okay.
that, there's no need to, because
So
we can get good
before
price.
they do the budget for a piece of technology, they need to call the
I
tech.
I do. I think that's
Okay.
a great. That's what really what you should do, because because they most likely can help you get a better price anyway. And our goal is to use as much money. I mean, as
Okay,
little money
so
as
call
we
the
can.
technology office if you're gonna be purchasing
Yeah,
tech.
yeah,
Okay,
good.
that's a really good tip.
Yeah.
All right, we give you a spot to
Yeah, the web link there.
to put a video or other things. Also, you can add photos,
Yep.
which is a great way, helping people visualize what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. We end up as readers doing that anyway, so if you want to make sure you guide us to the right things, because if curiosity gets sparked, we're going to look it up. We're sitting at home reading these, right? So we're going to want to know what it is, so guide us through the right
All right,
thing
the
there.
name, the discipline, school, these are all, the rest of it is pretty
Yeah.
straightforward. So if you're talking to a teacher
Yeah.
or staff member who's writing a grant, would you have any other tips, suggestions so that they can be successful?
Absolutely, I'll give you a few. One is the purpose, and I'm going to read the Spark Grant. The purpose of the Spark Grant is to support creative programs, program ideas that will enhance student learning and enrich their educational experience in the Bozeman Public Schools. So that does a couple of things, that explains a couple of things that I'll break down here really quickly. One, our grants need to be written by Bozeman Public School teachers, staff members. We do allow student groups to write grants, but they have to have a staff member advisor there doing that. So we want to make sure that happens. We don't accept grants from parents writing them, or parent groups. And that's simply because we need, whatever is purchased, it needs to be monitored, and it needs to ensure to be passed through the school system, that it stays within the school system. It's harder to track it any other way. Really clear, something to be really clear about is we fund Spark projects up to $3,000. Unfortunately, if you write it for $3,001, then it gets kicked out of our grants that we can read. We cannot give $3,000 to a grant. Obviously, the $1 is kind of a silly exaggeration there. But say you're wanting something for $4,000, and we're not sure you have that extra $1,000. Then we're putting $3,000 in a fund for you that's going to sit, right?
So
And we
we
do
won't do
not
that.
want. We will not do that. It has to be $3,000 or
But
less.
if you have a $4,000 project and you've already raised the other $1,000,
Correct. Then go for it. Then write it as
Explain
and
that.
explain that. And that's where you explain in the budget area, right?
Okay.
You're going to explain that in that budget area. There's a spot.
Good.
The funding timetable, we want this. Obviously, there is a little bit of wiggle room, because writing from November to November can be a little bit tricky in a school calendar. But it's a 12-month period that we fund. So if it goes a little bit over and you explain that, no big deal, right? That's going to be shown in the timeline. Right, that's where we'll see that. It does not hurt you to go over in that timeline if you have it really well explained. Then that doesn't hurt you in the scoring process. I will say it again, that this is read by community members, so it just really it makes a big difference to know that you're writing it that way. There is the timeline application. We're going to attach a Spark Grant info sheet. To with this video. It's going to show your timeline there, kind of helpful to keep yourself on track there. And then along with this, we're going to also give you something so incredibly helpful, and it is types of grants that we like to fund, and then grants that we cannot fund. So there are things that we cannot do because of district rules or those kinds of things. I mentioned food. We don't do district textbooks if you needed extra textbooks. We don't do stipends. We don't pay substitute teachers. We don't do individual scholarships for student travel. We do not do repeat projects because that totally negates the idea of being a Spark grant. It's really awesome if you can share, like, if it's a project that you're going to do, how might you already be thinking about funding to pay for it for the following year? A lot of times PACs or different grants like to see that it's already working before they fund it. So we're kind of that spot to pilot something. And then things that we love to I'm going to let you read that there, but really look at those lists, because these have been very thoughtfully and they ongoing. We add and take away from these every year just to ensure that we're making good decisions for this money spent.
All right.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say is if you want a little extra help, you want to talk through something, feel free to call the office and they can get you in touch with one of the people here, that one of the grant readers that can help you a little bit more. We'd love to help you. This is our passion, so we want to help you and ensure that we're using this money right and well.
All right, well, you have until November 5th to go onto our website, hit the apply button, and do this grant application. We hope we get you to apply.
Yay, happy writing.
All right, thanks.